let's kick things off with an interesting debate at an American school where 5th graders in Nebraska were given a bizarre flyer from the school outlining rules of how to deal with bullies. Here's an example of some of the rules. Do not be afraid. Do not verbally defend yourself. Do not tell on bullies. Don't be a sore loser. Look, bullying's a huge issue, but those messages are so contradictory. What are the students to think of that?
Well, it's interesting because it's so contradictory to the sort of the change in the discussion around bullying over the last 2 years. I mean, bullying has always happened. I mean, I remember in my school, I was, occasionally I was bullied. I probably bullied other kids as well.
How is that possible? You're 8 feet tall.
not when I was in 3rd grade. But, but this is so different. I mean, the first one actually kind of makes sense. Don't be afraid, right? I mean, be strong, stand up. But the other ones then seem to go exactly what everybody, not just in Canada, but in the United States, has been telling kids. Go tell someone, come forward, talk about it. Don't be pushed around like that. So it's really kind of exactly
damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I would disagree with you that I don't think we're sending the message don't be pushed around by people. I think we're sending the message that we want to enable the victim stuff. I don't think we tell people to fight back.
No, but I'm saying that was a good line. That first line was don't be afraid. That's what it should happen.
Yeah,
and I noticed
stop, and then they go on with
the 10th one is like don't get hooked in by all the shenanigans and don't let people get a rise out of yourself. Yeah, learn to laugh at yourself, it says there. And I think that's fantastic. I just think it's kind of a weird, do not verbally defend yourself. You just wonder who put this together. I'd agree,
like, what do you do when little
but
Jimmy's got you up against the wall and he's telling you that he's going to punch you in the nose?
You should verbally, the first thing when a bear is coming at you in the woods, you yell as loud as you can, scat or whatever it is, and you do the same with a bully. You yell and then he doesn't back down and then you clock him right after.
Well, this is sort of perhaps not the standard book the Board of Education will tell you, but the best way probably to deal with a bully, if you can do it, is to actually fight back, right? I mean, this is the classic, antidote. I mean, it's not always possible. It's not fair to push kids to do that necessarily because sometimes it's a different situation. But if you could, that would probably be good advice.
Look, my son will be going to school at some point, and I will tell him, you be tolerant, you be respectful, you be kind. But if someone is bullying you and brings harm to you, you punch him. If you're being attacked, you punch back to defend yourself.
There's going to be some weird education commission that's going to haul you before the board and try and put you in jail. I know that's coming to all of us.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure they're writing it down right now. Alex Pearson's an evil parent, but if you have to defend yourself, you have to defend yourself.
That's sort of pride. I mean, I remember my dad also telling me about how you punch. You don't put your finger inside because you'll break your finger. Whether the Board of Ed would be able to do that, let's be realistic. They've talked about the things that you should be, you should feel free to come forward. If you're not going to punch back, at least feel free to come and tell someone about it. So, however, this difference is a natural kind of discussion. This one goes very...
this is a suck and blow, and you can't do both.
It's bizarre.
Right, it's probably just some sketchy administrator who came up with it on his own in 20 minutes and sent it out. I don't take it too seriously. I think it's a shame that Steven Seagal is sided with Putin now because he could have been he could have made a sort of national, Michelle Obama does the national food program thing and he could have done the national fight back program for the kids.
It could be also what John Kerry's going to talk about with Ukraine, who's being bullied by Russia. I mean, at the end of the day.
He's going to challenge him to a smackdown.
Is he? Yeah, no.
He would lose.
I have a feeling that they're going to put this memo out and say, don't tell anyone, just appease. Let's move on to the next topic. Western Washington University concerned there are simply too many white students on campus. Now they're seeking help to rectify the situation. They want to make sure that in the future we're not as white, this is a quote, as we are today. When I posted this on Facebook, because I thought it was just ridiculous, I was of course called a racist.
For posting it and calling it ridiculous.
Well, because I said white people need not apply. I mean, is this what we're saying? I mean...
I think the wording of it often comes forward on when we have these discussions, unfortunately. I think if we had heard it a different way, which I think is the intent, we would like a campus that was more diverse, in which case we had people from more backgrounds. That's a fairly typical refrain across all educational institutions across the country.
Whatever happened to the best students getting into university? The best marks, the best...
It is a typical refrain this day and age, and it really shouldn't be. It's funny that we take it. No, people turn around and they say, you're allowed in your ethnic enclave to be a total supremacist and a person who believes that your culture is superior and so forth, and you're essentially saying we need more of this group, that group, and the other group. And of course, and I think rightfully so, if white people said we need more white people, they'd be, oh my God, that's absolute racism, I can't believe you're saying that, but we somehow allow it. From the other side, this day and age, where there is not codified racism in society, this stuff is
that's
just silly.
that's not what he said. I mean, as I say, I think
Well,
his
he basically
wording,
called white people mediocre,
Well,
mediocre.
what you want-
Are there donors? What about white donors? Do they still want their money?
The question here, well, in fact, with a lot of donors, we see hospitals, we see universities going after more diverse donors as well, looking to tap into communities that haven't traditionally been part of the donor population. So actually, you see this.
Well, they're finding new rich people. That's what they're trying to do, which is smart.
But they're trying.
business.
But the point is, they're trying to reach groups that haven't been reached, whether it's for fundraising or students. Yes, you should have a system where people get in based on their marks, but you do need to reach out sometimes to invite people. And this is typical of any group. You want to. You see clubs do it. They go out and
Who
invite
feels
people.
excluded from university? What ethnic group feels
Well,
like
maybe-
they're not allowed to
not,
apply for
not
university?
allowed. Maybe they're not thinking about the University of Western Ontario as opposed to York or U of T in a big city, maybe Ottawa. The point is, universities, and I assume elsewhere in Northern Ontario too, perhaps, or other places, I've heard the same refrain out of Saskatchewan. We want to invite people from new cultures who may not have thought about, for example, the University of Saskatchewan, to come to Saskatchewan because it's not on. And this is what I take.
But this goes against Martin Luther King and what he stood for, which was, okay, we have been oppressed and we have been abused in the past, but we must get beyond that and welcome all and be.
But that's what they're saying.
No, but they're not, because they're saying white folks. Okay, look, we got too many of you. We need to get others.
They didn't say that they were going to change any of the admissions process.
No, because that's not what universities run. They'll take anybody now.
To be post-racial is to be post-racial, but we're so obsessed with racializing every situation we can. What's the gender breakdown of Parliament Hill? What's the racial breakdown of the McDonald's employees or the university enrollment? And you don't get away from that if you're endlessly fixated.
So what do they
on it.
do
And
when
I
they've
think
got
it's
like a
too bad.
program, like an IT program, where Asians seem to excel at the maths and scientists? Should they say to them, hey, we've got too many Asian folks.
You can't even say that, though.
Well, no, I know.
can't even say that.
I
I think
probably
what
just
they
said
might
something
say
racist.
is they might say we want to make sure all of our programs have a representative sample.
But that's
from
affirmative
across.
action.
Well, no, it's not, because what it does is when you go out and encourage groups to apply, you're talking about, when you typically have talked about affirmative action, changing the rules, saying like we're going to change different percentages, encouraging people, going into communities, and we see this for employment too.
But
when I was at the TDC, going in and not changing the criteria for employment, but making sure groups feel like they're being invited in to apply.
I just find, look, whatever happened to the best people getting in? Because at one point, as I recall,
why
growing
not
up, you
invite
had to
more people?
compete to get into university, and the best marks got in.
We're not talking about. They're not talking about the University of Western Ontario changing that. I think the more people you have competing, in fact, what it will do is drive probably the percentages up, because there'll be a bigger pool to choose from, and that's all they're saying.
But you're creating a false market. There are already many people who want to work for the TTC. They're putting their resumes out there, and you're saying we have this huge talent pool. Well, no, we're not satisfied with it. We want to encourage people. We want to go out of our way to encourage people who maybe wouldn't have applied because they can't be bothered to apply. And they go, well, you're making it easy
we heard this
for
argument
me.
out of Alberta when someone on council said, look, there's too many white people. Like, we cannot get into this battle of alienating one.
But no one is. Whether it's the TTC, when you increase the pool of applicants, whether you're the Royal Bank, the TTC, the University of Western Ontario, the chances are, as your pool gets bigger, on average, you will have better success rate in terms of you'll have a higher quality of people. So why wouldn't you go out and encourage as many people from as many groups, women, men?
Are you to suggest then, if we have a deadline of May 12th for all applicants to get in, you're going to look at those applicants and go, still don't have enough ethnicity.
No,
Let's go back.
Because that would be too late. What you should be doing, if the May is your deadline, you should be back in October, November, figuring out how you're going to look at where your applications have come. So you're going to not change your how you select them, but you're saying, look, we're going to go and encourage more applications, because then you get a better crop to create.
I can't help but look at this as reverse discrimination.
Well, I have a problem with the public sector doing it, only because they have enough time and money to fritter away doing all these things. I think if a corporation, if a bank suddenly decides we want to get people from this ethnic group or whatever, well, okay, fine, that's their choice.
But they do
I don't
it for
care
a reason. The Royal Bank, the banks are actually the classic example which lead on this. The Royal Bank, BMO have won awards. They actually have driven at this because
they want to sell to those groups, though, not because they want general diversity. Because if you're in a Filipino neighborhood, you want the bank manager to be Filipino so he can connect with the people and get their business.
Like in Chinatown, it would make sense to have.
No, but we're not just talking about bank direct. In fact, Royal Bank specifically has gone a lot further, because they're not just talking about bank managers, which are on a lower level of the management cycle. They're looking at their people in the downtown headquarters doing their analysis. They're looking for a broad basis for employment, not specifically because it's better for their image, although I'm sure that helps, but because they've said in their own words, because it creates a better employment culture and a better result. And so based on the dollars and cents, this is what's driving large corporations. So why wouldn't we say, you know, government should act more like corporations? Why wouldn't we have a government or
the total double standard line? Because when we say government doesn't act like corporations, when it's certain ways like, you know, cutting down the bottom line and so forth, only in these particular affirmative action plans.
But they should be both. Well, okay, fine, but if you're going to say it in one, you have to say it in the other ones too. I mean, it doesn't mean they're going to...
Best practices, business practices to government all across the board.
So
I'll agree with you there.
You're basically saying, what if a white candidate comes in who has the exact same credentials as an East Indian applicant?
What if you have two white people with exact same credentials?
Right.
I'm sure they
Does
I
that
don't
mean
know
you
how
have,
they do.
well, in this climate, we have to put them aside and say, we still need
They're not
others.
that, I don't know what they're doing because I'm not an expert in university admission. There's no indication in this story that there was any change in how they would review that compared to two white people exactly. You know, I have no idea how they do that, but there's
what
no
I took from the
indication.
article is that the person saying this was felt shame because what they view is that the university is too white, and if it has to be this white 20 years down the road, then his job as part of that school will be a failure because he didn't make that university, for whatever reason, more diverse.
I think it's, you know, society is changing, and I think if new cultures to the country and new immigrants don't want to go to your university, it does suggest
Like
your
maybe they're going to
university is
trades
maybe
colleges.
behind the times, for instance, or your university is not where things are going, because we know immigrant families are actually a lot more on the ball in terms of the jobs that are needed in the economy. So I do credit them with that there is something to say that if you're attracting new immigrants to your education institute, it probably suggests you're doing something right. But I don't necessarily think you need some quota breakdown.
And I would have to think that some
quota,
cultures decide.
There's no quota breakdown.
Well, it's a soft quota. It's
It is a
No, but they're encouraging.
But
The Royal Bank, to my knowledge, just to go, because they keep winning diversity awards in Toronto, so that's why I cite them. But you know, they don't have a quota system that I know of. They go out there and they want to encourage, and then they put everyone through the same criteria. And you know what? If somebody who happens to be white wins it, they do. But if you have a bigger pool, the chances are your standards will go up.
Maybe new immigrants, though, are saying, you know what, I don't want to get some silly poetry degree. I'm going to get a trades degree at a college because I want to go into, well, we don't know that. Everyone who goes to university, well.
We know when we look at the trades, we know that, that there's people, one of the trades are actually saying exactly the same thing, that we need to reach into new Canadian communities to attract them to the trades. It's exactly the same line they're saying as well, and yet, you know, so we should bring them into this discussion too. And they're not saying that they don't want white people going into the trades. They're saying we need to access more groups, more diverse groups, and get them into the trades. It's exactly the same language, just as pretty standard. I think they chose poor wording here.
I'd agree with you on that.
And that's what we're
I got to wrap it here, guys. I just have to. All right.
Alrighty.
Thank you both.
Bye.
Adam Giambroni and Anthony Fury joining us here. Great chat. All right.